Good evening, council members. There being a quorum for tonight's special City Finance and Governance Committee meeting, we shall commence. So I'd like to declare the special meeting of the City Finance and Governance Committee open and advise that this meeting will be recorded and streamed live to the City of Adelaide website. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken of this meeting. This means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed or published publicly by the Council, including transferring outside of Australia. Now I'd like to move to our acknowledgement of country, and Council acknowledges that we're meeting today on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And we also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations who are present today. Apologies and leave of absence. There are no apologies or leave of absence to make note of. Declarations of conflict of interest. Any council members have a declaration of a conflict of interest to make? No, there being none, we shall move on to agenda item 4, deputations. There are nil, which takes us to the workshop, which, as you'd be aware, that's the sole purpose for our session here today, is the workshop in relation to long-term financial plan. Before I hand it over to the team to introduce us and step us through this, just wanted to recap our timeframes for tonight. So as you'd be aware, we have a council meeting starting at 6 o'clock in the chamber. So our aim will be to start wrapping things up here by about 5:45 to give us enough time to get ready and head over into the chamber. We do want to keep this as a fairly open conversation. Anthony and I have been having a chat earlier on, so we'll take questions as we move through rather than waiting till the end. So we'll take questions as we move through. But I'm also mindful that if we start to get bogged down on one particular issue, I might try to speed us up a little bit in order to get us out of here by 5:45.
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
Councillor Kouros.
Council meeting start at 5:30?
It starts at 6 p.m. Yep. So we've had the council meeting pushed back to 6 p.m. start so that we have sufficient time for this, and we're permitted to do that under the rules for the council meetings.
It's in the papers. I know.
Wonderful. With that, we'll hand it over to the administration to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Members, tonight's workshop begins the journey of revising and updating our long-term financial plan in accordance with a roadmap that Mr Spartellis will take us through. Importantly, there will be significant opportunities for council member engagement throughout the process, and tonight kicks off that process. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Mr Spartellis, supported by Ms Van Berkel, who will take us through the presentation.
Thanks, Michael. The first slide really just, I guess, shows the planned sessions that we have and those interactions with the different bodies that we will need to necessarily take through the process. Tonight, I guess, is the start of a series of workshops. We want to seek your feedback and your views on the levers and settings that are available to you that will then allow us to build the long-term financial plan to come back for committee and council consideration. Key thing I want you to note here is because this is a strategic management plan under the Act, we do need to consult with the public on it. Legislation requires a minimum of 21 days. However, legislation also asks us to consider what our policy on public consultation is. Currently for strategic management plans, we are asked to have a 6-week public consultation. That is problematical for us in reaching the deadline of October without having excessive special meetings in it. So at the right point in time, we will be bringing, I guess, a request to council to minimise the public consultation to the 3 weeks under the Act rather than the 6 weeks. I just wanted to forewarn you that will be coming to enable us to make the deadline. This is just a graphical representation of the roadmap, just to show the key touch points along the process. Again, just pointing out that because of the 3-week public consultation, in order to fit that in within the October deadline, we We'll be bringing a report back to CFG prior to the close of the public consultation necessarily on the 15th of October, noting that the public consultation is planned to end on the 16th. However, before we then present that to Council for adoption late October, we will present also as part of that the feedback on the public consultation as we go. So tonight we want to understand your views on what we see as responsible prudential limits and to get your feedback on that. We also want to look at the levers that are available to you and their associated settings and talk through some of the implications of those. And then at the end, I guess if there are any other opportunities that you would like us to consider throughout this process, we will be seeking feedback on that as well.
Councillor Davis, you have a question?
Yeah, I just didn't quite grasp so normally it would be 6 weeks for the consultation. Why are we going down to 3 weeks?
Yeah, through the chair, legislation requires 3 weeks. Our policy currently sits at 6 weeks for a strategic management plan. We feel that given that we've already consulted on the 24-28 strategic plan, on the AMPs, we've already consulted on the business plan and budget and various other strategies and plans, we feel like 3 weeks is probably adequate to be able to, I guess, gauge the community feedback on the long-term financial plan without the full 6 weeks that we need, which would, like I said, to meet the October deadline, we'd have to cram a lot more special meetings in to be able to achieve that.
But our policy is 6 weeks? Okay, so we probably should have started this earlier to meet our policy?
Not necessarily. I mean, the policy is at the behest of the council, and if council choose to go for 3 weeks, then we can still make that time frame and I guess adhere to the Act. We weren't in a position to start early because we were waiting for the adoption of the 24-25 annual business plan.
But a lot of councils, a lot of councils start this process a lot earlier, and are you basically saying to us now that we don't have a choice but to go against our current policy if we're going to meet the deadline?
Through the chair.
Through the presiding member, the roadmap that Mr Spartellis has presented effectively delivers on a CEO KPI of revising and updating the long-term financial plan by October. That is the current hard date for the finalisation of this process, and as Mr Spartellis has indicated, we aren't in a position to go out and consult for 6 weeks and still meet the CEO KPI for the finalisation of the long-term financial plan.
And so just to clarify, for the purpose of tonight, we're not looking at signing off on any changed timeframes of consultation. You're sharing that with us so we can consider it, and then ultimately a decision will need to be made on that. Great, thank you. Lord Mayor, and then we'll keep moving.
Just a quick question about the ARC workshops. ARC is really internal or external. It seems odd that the ARC workshop on the 27th of the 9th is after we approve for consultation. Is that normal? Because one of the workshops with them is for parameters, assumptions, levers, and that's in the programme of workshops. It's just the timing of that second one that worries me.
Yeah, through the chair, it's not unusual to engage with ARC during consultation. We've done that through the annual business plan and budget in the past, and again, it's to make the deadline. In terms of ensuring that ARC get everything that they need to be able to make an informed feedback to council, we will ensure they get that. The first session is designed to provide them with everything that this committee gets in the next 2 sessions, so they're fully aware of everything that has been presented to committee. And then once we've had a chance to develop the long-term financial plan for public consultation, they will provide an opportunity to provide feedback on the full plan.
And the second question for ESCOSA, I can't work out where ESCOSA fits in this because they're also auditing what we do. Where will that be on the roadmap?
Thank you. Through the
Through the presiding member, based on the fact that the City of Adelaide is included as part of tranche 3 of the ESCOSA review schedule, we'll be engaging with them quite separately throughout this process. and working within their timelines and deadlines for the completion of their review process. So we haven't included that in the roadmap, but council members can be reassured that there'll be a full engagement process with ASCOSA in accordance with our obligations to provide information to them.
So just, CEO, just to clarify that, so when would we expect to get ASCOSA results? I know there's not a specific time and date yet, but and how does that relate to the process?
That's a very good question, Chair, and one I'm unable to answer until the next meeting with ASCOSA, which is due in the next week.
Ms Van Berkel?
Sorry, through the Chair, ASCOSA remit commences on the 15th of August. They will take the draft long-term financial plan in its form in September. The final results will come out in the new calendar year, so January, February.
Well beyond councils.
Let's continue on. Noted though that obviously there's a discussion here to be had around the timeframes for consultation, but given the time we have tonight, let's push on.
Yeah, I think also Mr Sedgman was alluding to the fact that we do meet with the ASCOSA next week, and we'll again, I guess the timelines will be subject to any discussion that might come from that. In terms of what goes into developing the long-term financial plan, these are the inputs that we go through on a systematic basis. However, in terms of what we're asking committee to consider are the items up there that are highlighted in green. So the adopted strategies, policies and plans, we're looking at how they play out through the long-term plan to ensure that any costs associated with them that we know at that point in time have been included. The community expectation and capacity to pay is around, I guess, where we feel what's affordable for the community in the current environment and the future environment. We're also, as we said at the start, looking at what are the responsible prudential borrowing limits, and I want to take you through those in detail so you get a good feel for where they sit in terms of comparisons to I guess other forms of borrowing, but also for our long-term plan projection, and then the revenue expenditure levers that are available to you. Now, some of these we can change in the short term, but because this is a long-term financial plan, a lot of the things we are talking about are changes to settings that will have impact in the medium to longer term, as opposed to the shorter term, which we'll manage through the annual business plan and budget process. I'm not going to labour these. We show these quite a bit, but these are the financial principles that Council adopted that we use to prepare both the annual business plan and the long-term financial plan. There's a new one at the bottom there that is effectively there's a cash flow from operations ratio that many councils use, and it's used to ensure that we are at least covering our operational expenditure from our operational revenue, in effect, so that we are not living off our credit card. But the other, I guess, important point we want to make there is that we also need to make sure we generate enough operating revenue or net cash flow from operations to ensure we continue to repay the principal and interest associated with any borrowings that we do take on.
Councillor Martin?
Yeah, look, just a quick question. Is the bottom principle the additional principle referred to at 23? Yes. Thank you.
The next session that we'll be having with the committee is around our capital. So tonight is really to, I guess, frame the situation that we've got, look at what the current situation is with a view to expanding and exploring this more as we move through the roadmap. The table up there shows the current 10-year average based on the asset management plans. It's important to note that these are the 100% expenditure, so we're not looking at the 92, the 95, the 97.5 asset renewal funding ratio that we're talking about. But this is if we were to spend 100% of our asset management plans, the average over the next 10 years falls like this. The key point there is that there is a $14.9 million annual shortfall over that 10-year period, and we will need to unpack that with you as we move through to understand how that plays out. The key I guess the key point here is the levers available to you to manage this over time. On the revenue side, obviously we have rate revenue increases that we choose what level that we feel is acceptable to increase on a whatever annual or regular basis that we may need to. Fees and charges are also another form of revenue that we have in our settings on those. Currently, the long-term financial plan just assumes CPI increases in those at the current. The other...
Mrs. Batal, just before we go on here, just to make sure we're all on the same page here around what we're being presented with. So what we're saying is we're currently through the FY25 budget and business plan, we're targeting 92.5% asset renewal funding ratio. This is what's required to get us to 100%, which is suggesting to get from the 92.5 to the 100, there's a $14.5 million shortfall, 14.9, sorry.
On average over the next 10 years.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Davis.
As part of this process as well about reviewing these things, a lot of councils have seen their asset renewal plans basically underestimated significantly, which has led to a lot of other councils needing to raise their rates as well. Have we taken that into account in this picture, or is that still yet to come?
Through the chair, these figures we're showing here are based on the AMPs that we recently consulted on and were approved by council. They have had a much more rigorous process overlaid on them than we have in the past. So we are confident that that reasonably represents, I think, our best understanding of them at the moment of the condition of our assets, our service levels, and then what we need to do to meet those. On the expenditure side of the settings associated with this, there are the service levels that you set as a council that determine to what level or what quality that we maintain our assets over time. We're not suggesting they need changes. What we are suggesting is over the medium to longer term, we probably need to review those on a regular basis to ensure that they are still meeting community needs and community expectations. But it's important that we point out that that is an area that we can explore should we need to. And then the other one is, as the chair alluded to, is around our asset renewal funding ratio targets. Currently, the long-term financial plan assumes that over a 4-year period, we will move from 90% to 100%, and we will unpack and explore that for you throughout the process, particularly when we're talking capital with you. I was going to whiteboard this with you, so I apologise for the level and the quality of the drawing, but it's a bit difficult on the iPad. But I guess what I want to do is start to say that the LGA recommended range for the asset renewal funding ratios is between 90 and 110% in any given year, but over a 10-year period, it would be to target that 100%, which is what we have at the moment adopted to do. This will be the focus of the SCOSA, ensuring that we, over time, try and get as close as we can to this 100% to make sure that we are maintaining our infrastructure to the levels that we need to. To demonstrate the next part is, here's our stepping over the years from 90 to 100%. The key thing here is that CPI is assumed within the LTFP. So on the cost side, we're assuming our costs move by CPI, but our revenue moves by CPI as well. The key thing here, and we introduced this in the 24-25 budget, was the concept of the asset renewal repair fund, where we had a shift in the expenditure required to cover our asset renewal, which is the 90 to 92.5%, and we needed to generate extra revenue for that. The same will apply over the next few years if we continue to target 100%. So the scribble in red up there, I guess, shows the amount in today's dollars over and above where we currently sit that we may need to increase our revenue by if we want to continue on the trajectory to 100% asset renewal funding over time. The jump back is an increase of about 12.7 million over the next 3 years, or in 25-26 it's about 1.5% increase of rates over and above CPI. The amount in 26-27 equates to about a 3% increase over and above CPI, and then in the fourth year, 27-28, a 4.2% increase. These are things that we will need to unpack and explore as we go through. However, as we increase the base, those jumps are less, less incremental as we go through. So the decisions that we make in each annual business plan and budget will impact the level of increase over and above the current revenue base or rating base that we have. Are there any questions on this one?
Yeah, can you say that again? So if we, in order to get to the 100%, what rate increase would we need to apply today so that going forward is about 4%, 5%?
I'd say 12.7 million divided by 140
10%.
million. Can't do that off the top of my head, but it's close to
10% for
just under 10%, I think,
okay.
9% in total.
So a rate increase of 10%. The other question I had was a lot of from what I'm seeing in the long-term financial plan with the major street upgrades, those assets haven't met their end of use or end of life on paper. So essentially what that says to me then is that we are bringing these assets forward for renewal and doing them at a point sooner. So that actually means that in actual terms, to maintain the rest of the assets, which we would normally assume that their asset management plans would be over a longer period, because we're bringing them forward under this program. If we're getting to 100%, that says to me that the rest of the assets under the city are not at 100%, because we're taking those funds from elsewhere for the streets which are being brought forward. So my suggestion is that this actually needs to be 105, 106% or something.
Mark, I don't know if you've got any comment on that, but I think the other thing that we can consider as part of our settings is start to look at asset renewal by asset class as well. So at the moment what you've got there is the entire asset base and what we're saying we need. We can finesse that a little bit, so we can have a look at where potentially roads or stormwater or something else is either under or overdone in a given year. We do have the ability to adjust that, but that hasn't been factored in yet, but it's something that we may be able to unpack and consider over time.
Because I think that's really important, because from my brain whirling around, I suppose that we're bringing those major street upgrades significantly forward. So that means that if we're going to get to 100, then there will be other infrastructure that isn't at 100 or is well below 90, as we're telling everybody.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd have to take that on notice and go and speak to my team to better understand those figures and come back to you.
We can take that on notice, that would be good. Can I just check some information? So, Councillor Davis, you referred to 10% rate increase.
Just for this, yeah.
But I don't believe there's anywhere in the slide deck that says 10%, does it? So there's all sorts of assumptions that sit behind this entire discussion. So it's, while I can see how you may have arrived at 10%, I don't think it's appropriate at this stage to be making any conclusions.
That was simply taking our estimate that we'd need $12.7 million over the next 3 years to get to 100%, and then simply dividing that by 140 million. So
I just think there's a lot of numbers in here that we need to unpack, and we're at a little bit of a way in. I appreciate it's useful.
Can I just say, Chair, that we've had this discussion a number of times about these assumptions, and this entire discussion on long-term financial plan is all about assumptions. So what the administration have said is 10% assumption just for this class.
Cumulative.
Cumulative. Yeah, if we did it today, to me.
Cumulative for all.
Can you please put your phone on?
For all
Your
assets.
microphone on. See it?
The observation's correct. It's 10% cumulative over a 3-year period, but importantly, this graph is not just road assets. This is all assets. All assets. Okay, so it's about the need, as we've consistently said, to increase council's investment in asset renewal in accordance with its revised asset management plans. Our starting parameter is that we need to move our investment from 90%, which we hit in 23-24, to 100% in 27-28. So yes, it's a cumulative 10 based on decisions of the council, which you will be presented with through throughout this process to fund asset renewal class by class. Connecting the investment in upgrade with renewal in this context is not appropriate.
Sorry, Councillor Davis. I know this is important.
No, it's really important.
I understand it's important.
Because
But I've also, sorry, can you please pause? I've got other people wanting to make a contribution here as well, and I am mindful of the time, so I'm happy to come back to you. Thank you, CEO. Lord Mayor, I think you had your hand up earlier on, then Councillor
I'm
Lee.
sorry, just a quick question. Considering where we've come from historically, and we've struggled to get to 90%, are we required to hit the 100% within 4 years, or could it be a slightly more gentle slope? Isn't the assumption that we're going for 4 years? And if we took out the 160 million for the once-in-a-lifetime generational products, we might get there sooner or later, depending on whether those gold-plated assets get done sooner rather than later, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but through the chair, the Lord Mayor is correct that this trajectory is based on our current adopted position of getting to 100% within 4 years. And now that is a decision that council can stick to, or we can vary subject to where the final long-term financial plan numbers and projections land. In terms of the 160 million, I need to speak to Nicole, but I know that the previous version and the current version have that in it, so I think we will still be requiring the jump to get to the asset renewal funding ratio, inclusive or exclusive of the 160 million associated with the significant renewals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. My question was partly answered, but I was just wanting to point, it's more like 9%, because 10% sounds like to me a headline thing, but it's more like 9%.
Okay, I think either way we'll need to at some stage clarify the numbers so we're all on the same page, working with the same information.
Yeah, for the record and for the recording, I was going to suggest it's closer to 9%.
But either way, I think we don't equate numbers until we're happy with how they're being calculated. Councillor Davis, I did say I'd come back to you.
The question, and thank you very much for the administration for taking on notice per asset class, but I absolutely want to make it clear that if the asset management plan is for 30 years and we're doing a significant upgrade in a 15-year period, that asset management class is brought forward. So in order to bring all of the other asset classes up to 100%, that means that that figure of 100% would probably need to be in excess of 100% for all the asset classes on average, if we're just looking totalitarian across everything. Otherwise, it's going to distort it because we're bringing forward the asset renewal to half its lifespan. So it absolutely is relevant to this discussion, and I would very much like the administration to continue through and provide that information anyway, because it's absolutely essential for me to understand.
I think we're agreed all around the table here that understanding what percentages are hit in what years is really important. Back to you, Mrs. Spitalis.
Which brings us to this, through the chair, which brings us to the significant renewals. So the three key pieces of infrastructure that have been identified within the current life AMPs is the Adelaide Bridge, the Torrens Weir structure, but also Rundle New Park, which also needs to have some consideration in the next while to understand how we want to treat that from a long-term financial plan perspective. The options available to us are at the bottom there in terms of advocacy and external grant funding, seeking help from other levels of government or other forms to help offset the cost of us maintaining and renewing this. Asset ownership is another one where there may be, I guess, some interest maybe in others taking ownership of these things if they want to achieve other certain objectives. And borrowings is our other. As a principle, we do not borrow for renewals. We like to cover those from operating revenue. However, given the size and nature of these renewals, we may need to use borrowings to fund them in the period that they need to be delivered. The other options available, and we'll bring this back as part of the next session, is to start to understand what are the options that we have available for each of these assets, for example, the Adelaide Bridge, and I don't want to put words in the infrastructure team's mouth, but I may be here, we can spend money on it to extend its current useful life, so at a much lower level than renewing and replacing the bridge altogether. We could renew it as is to work in its current capacity and its current loading that it can actually have over that bridge. Or if there's an upgrade needed to, I guess, provide for higher load capacity over that bridge, then we'll need to actually have other conversations with other parties to understand how that plays out for us as well. So it's not just a straight let's renew this thing in 10 years' time and cost us $60 million. We need to go out and understand and advocate if there is assistance available, but then what is the preferred option for us if other alternatives are unavailable to us? How do we manage this within our current long-term financial plan? The same goes for the Torrens Weir. In discussion I had with the chair prior to this, one of the suggestions he had was a good idea was do we start to talk to the Weir as more and start to reposition it as a flood mitigation asset as opposed to a heritage listed asset, and so what does that then mean for potential options for us moving forward as a council as well? And in terms of Rundle U Park, the last iteration of the long-term financial plan, because we were uncertain about how that may be treated, we didn't want some components of that left in and some taken out, so everything was removed. I think going forward we need to have a position on that so that we understand how that plays out in the long-term financial plan. Do we again spend money to extend the useful life of it, or do we actually look at potential redevelopment options? These are things that we'll need to bring back to council to get a position on so that we can ensure that they are appropriately accounted for in the long-term financial plan. For example, if we are going to spend money to extend the life, we need to then bring in the revenue that car park will generate as well. We can't have one without the other.
Councillor Martin first.
Look, thank you very much. I've not actually heard that remark before, that it's possible to refurbish and therefore reduce the cost. But I guess the issue for me is, with such a tight schedule for the long-term financial plan, how can we actually make those decisions in order to inform the long-term financial plan and have confidence in that? And I look to guidance in respect of the bridge and the weir, and invite the administration to consider whether it might not be better to cost those as refurbishments rather than complete renewals, which would be our best position. And thirdly, in respect of Rundle U Park, which when it was removed by the previous council from our asset management list, the asset as well and the income were removed, as I understand it. If it is likely that the council will decide to sell the asset, how can we reach that decision in the short time available to consider the long-term financial plan?
Yeah, through the chair, I don't envisage that there'll be any pressure to make a decision ultimately on each of these assets at this point in time. But what we may have to do is the long-term financial plan is effectively a consolidation of all of our known knowns at this point in time, but then it's actually, there are a set of assumptions that are associated. So as part of the adoption of this, we may have to come to a position in terms of an assumption, but not an absolute decision on what we're doing. So for example, we may, for the, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but for the Adelaide Bridge, we may decide to spend money to renew it and extend it and push it out beyond here. But in the meantime, that gives us time to adequately investigate options and bring them back to council to make decisions. So it'll be, for me, it's around having a shared understanding of what the assumptions are around these, so that should people ask us or question us how they form part of the long-term financial plan, we're all on the same page in regard to that. There may be some big assumptions, but that, there may be an assumption that state government give us $30 million towards it. I mean, we will just need to understand what assumptions we're comfortable in assuming for adoption of the long-term financial plan without having an absolute decision on those things.
And look, through the chair then, would it be a decision of council that determined that the treatment of those renewals, or at least the status, whether they're to be renewed or just refurbished, would that be necessarily a decision of council, or is that something that can be taken through this process here?
CEO?
Through the presiding member, certainly there will be decisions that need to be made by council in relation to the assumptions underpinning the long-term financial plan projections. As Mr. Spartalis has correctly suggested, there's no need for a series of significant decisions regarding these assets in the next 3 months, but we need to agree the basis of the assumptions in the long-term financial plan. Should that be council foots the bill on its own, it assumes a grant income of 50%. These are assumptions which will then ultimately lead to further reports and further decisions by council regarding what will actually happen as distinct from the assumptions. So, as Mr. Spartalis said, the assumptions resolved by council are the basis of the shared understanding about how we deal with these matters in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgman. I'm going to get us to pick up the pace here. I'm about to run through who's next in the order of questions, but note that after we've discussed significant renewals, we'll also need to touch on new and upgraded assets, and also, very importantly, prudential limits. So if we can keep our questions and answers fairly short and sharp, that would be great. So I have next Councillor Kouros, then Councillor Snape, or Deputy Lord Mayor, and then Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me, because it kind of feels like Groundhog Day. We've talked about, I've been here since 2018, and we've talked about the bridge, and we've talked about the weir, we've talked about, and I'm sure that in one of our long-term financial plans, the operations covered the cost of repair of the bridge and the weir. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we did have this discussion at one point, Anthony, but I think the long-term financial plan had to change due to the ratio that we're looking at here. And we did have discussions in the past about the bridge needing to speak to the state government. We did have discussions in the past about repairing the bridge to only fit a certain load. We were waiting for the costings to come back on that and the comparison on that. Still haven't seen any of that. It's the first time I have heard about the Torrens Weir to be talked about as a flood mitigation asset. Never heard that one before, but that
was fresh about 40 minutes ago.
Okay,
It's an option of
so that's a new
approach it.
one, but that is that's something that's new. I do agree, but we have had discussions about the weir before. We have had a talk about Rundle U-Part before, and yes, correctly, it was removed from the previous council long-term financial plan because we had asked council or administration, to give us options in regards to developing it in the same way as what we have done with the Central Market Arcade. And maybe my memory serves me well, but I do remember that we did talk about refurbishing it as well. We're waiting for those costs as well in a comparison to its income and its refurbishment. We did have those discussions. I feel like we're going backwards. I feel like we're having the same passion, the same conversations on these three items over and over again every year, and I guess that's just a statement. I'm not asking for any comeback on that. It's just disappointing that we're talking about it like it's new and fresh. We should really be more advanced on these three issues. We've had lots and lots of discussions about them, and we've requested a lot of detail in regards to them, and we've requested a lot of options. There were motions, there was directions, and all of that. So I would hope that maybe all of that you've said, that we can actually reach to some sort of conclusion on them in this council.
Thank you, Councillor Kouros. We will take that as a comment. Sorry, Mr. Spitalis, we're going to keep moving because we're going to run short of time. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. A lot of most of mine has been touched on, so I'll just be brief as well. And I actually agree with Councillor Kouros, and I think my fellow councillors are nodding there as well. My understanding is, in regards to Adelaide Bridge, it is council policy that we now support a potential tram line to North Adelaide, and so the options that we're looking at in renewal or rebuilding or what have you, there's a lot of R's involved, refurbish, should involve those concepts, and I'd like to see those presented to us as early as reasonably possible, so that we can help that kind of dictate this going forward, and also the wider city transport policy. So yes, I much appreciate it. Thank you.
Take that as feedback and a comment. Councillor Davis?
Now, you know, same thing with the aquatic centre. We can do small refits over time and try and extend it and push that expense out. But my understanding is that eventually we're going to have to do this upgrade. We're going to actually have to rebuild it and bring it back to the status quo. So that, looking at these three assets, that's going to cost us $160 million. If we were to plan over the next 10 years to pay for that renewal as they reach the end of their life, what would need to be the council rate increase today to pay for that $160 million?
Through the chair, I'm not sure I'd be recommending that, and so I'm not able to answer that.
Okay, so because my understanding is, according to the report that we received earlier in the year, we had budgeted in our long-term financial plan for $160 million worth of additional cost, and that was represented as borrowings. My suggestion is that's another 10% increase in rates today over the next 10 years. That will be a fixed one-off increase of 10% to pay $460 million. Now, the other question is, if you've stated lots of options here today about what we could and what we couldn't do, but seriously, how long and how much is it going to cost us to extend the useful life of these? And then when are we going to have to pay the piper? When are we actually going to have to go and replace these assets? And how much more time and how much is it going to cost for us to extend the life of these assets?
Yeah, can I just make an observation, Councillor Davis? Appreciate you running numbers yourself, but they're your numbers. My understanding is they don't represent the numbers for the administration. Is that correct? I think that's a fair statement.
No, it's not a fair statement. If you look at the current rate revenue,
well, sorry, it is because
divided by.
Sorry, can you just pause for a moment? Facts are important here. So,
Ask me a question.
well, I'm just going to clarify my question there. Is you've suggested an additional 10%, and what I'm just clarifying is we've not heard that from the administration. So,
through the presiding member, I just need to clarify, there is no assumption that this renewal will be provided for by a rate increase in the current long-term financial plan. That's why we're having the conversation. We can take Councillor Davis's question on notice about if it was the decision of council to fund these renewals for a rate increase, we can provide that answer. But that, as Mr. Spartellis has said, that is not the recommended option at this point in time.
so given that it's 5:42 or 5:43,
But the important point.
Sorry, Councillor Davis, can you please not interrupt me?
You asked me a question.
So, well, I'm chairing the meeting and I'm advising us that it's 5:43. We have 7 minutes before I need to get us out of here. We're going to aim to go a little bit longer, but we do need to leave by 10:02. I think the best thing to do here is take this on notice. There are still two very important topics that come up, which I'm fairly certain are of interest to you as well as the other members. So let's keep moving on. Thank you, Mrs. Spitalis.
So can I just point out as a point of order, like to put in 1 hour for this meeting, when we're talking about $160 million here, through the millions of dollars beforehand, why have we got an hour meeting? Why do we have an entire night on this?
So I'm happy to clarify that we've... So can I just have the floor, please? We've got a process that's been outlined to us. We're building up to a decision in October, and there are going to be extensive discussions along the way. So this is the first step in the journey. Mrs. Spitalis.
Through the chair, I'm going to take this slide as read, but point out that I guess one of the key determinants in terms of level of debt going forward, given that we fund all of our new and upgraded assets from borrowings at this point in time, is the commitment that this council made to spend $15 million per year for the term of this council, that we have carried that assumption on throughout the life of the LTFP, is something that we may need to consider subject to where our borrowings end up. But again, the key levers there are ensuring that we've got sufficient cash from operating and renewal activities that we could use to fund borrowings. Again, advocacy for external grant funding, and also, I guess, prioritising commitment over the life of the long-term financial plan. In terms of the next slide, I want to talk about at the start about what are, I guess, responsible prudential limits. At the moment, the council has adopted 3 key ratios to allow us to manage, monitor and maintain our borrowings level. The asset test ratio looks at a percentage of saleable property assets, which effectively sets a limit that we can borrow up to. The interest expense ratio is one that we use to ensure that we're not overly using operating revenue to fund our level of borrowings, to make sure that our interest expense is at a manageable and sustainable level. And then the leverage test ratio looks at total borrowings relative to rate revenue, not our total revenue, because that is our single largest controllable revenue. For just by comparison, in the 24-25 business plan and budget, the asset test ratio was sitting at 17%. The interest expense ratio is projected to be 2%, and the leverage test ratio is 0.4. In terms of then...
So, Mr. Patalas, do have a question from Councillor Davis, if we could keep it short though, because we are about to head out.
So, $12 million a year for AMPs, $160 million over 10 years for the major assets, and then $15 million a year for new upgraded assets. My calculation is 9% plus 11% plus 10%, which is a total of 30% rate increase today to make this stack up.
So, Councillor Davis, I'll take it as a comment, because we're not here to run the numbers on that today. It's about presenting information, so we'll take it as a comment. Mr. Spitalis, back to you.
So just wanted to explore quickly the asset test ratio and show how that compares to other forms of borrowings. If we look at a household, a business and the council, sorry, I should have expanded on the HBC as part of this process. But homes generally, within normal bounds, can borrow up to about 90%, 80% without insurance. Businesses will, for specific projects, generally can get around 80% of the total cost of the project in terms of borrowings. And council has set its prudential limit at 50%. So the key there, I guess, is just to understand that it is a reasonably conservative setting. Understand that we are a council, we are a government, so we do need to naturally be probably more conservative than a business or a household. But it's just to show the level of comfort that we currently have, given especially that the current 24-25 annual business plan is projecting that to be around 17%. We currently hold around $306 million in property assets, and therefore our current limit that we can go to within these is $153 million. We're not suggesting we go there, but that is the current setting based on this ratio.
I know there's further questions. We need to get through the slides, and we've got 2 minutes left, and there'll be an opportunity to ask further questions either directly through the administration for anyone, because I know there's a lot of interest in this, and we do have another workshop that will be coming up, Mrs. Matalas.
To then consider that from the leverage test ratio that I described, which looks at debt to rates revenue. Typical loan in South Australia at the moment is about $520,000. The average household income is around $70,000. So a household covers, revenue covers 13% of this total debt at any point in time. Businesses generally target around a third. We are currently at 70% using our 140 million. If we had debt of 200, I should have done that at 150. I apologise. So we're closer to 100% coverage of our total controllable revenue as a proportion of our total projected borrowings that we can go to. We currently have zero borrowings. In terms of the prudential limits, in terms of the interest expense ratio, if we use the same numbers for a household that has $70,000 of revenue and a loan of $520,000, there's about a 40% of the annual household income is currently going out the door on interest. For a business, they would target no more than 10%. We also have a prudential limit of 10% as a maximum, but we probably target somewhere around 3 to 5% as an absolute maximum going forward. But again, these are just designed to show that within our current debt projections, there is some comfort. That doesn't mean that we don't need to make decisions about how we manage within those limits, but it was important to understand, and I'm happy to take questions offline about this for committee members that may have further questions. But it is just to show that within the normal bounds of borrowings, local government councils by nature are quite conservative, but doesn't mean that we need to max that out there.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Nicole. We can just skip forward to the final slide, and we have reached 10:02, so we really do need to get going. Remind all the elected members of the questions that were originally posed at the very start, so we could just slip through to the next slide. So there are a series of questions here that the team is asking for feedback on. Obviously, this is of significant interest to everyone here. So clearly, if there are any other questions, we have encouraged them to be sent through. And at this stage, as CEO, we have the next discussion around this, I believe, is proposed for the 6th of August. It is for the 6th of August.
Yeah. So tonight was a induction workshop. We've introduced some issues, some questions, set the stage for the ongoing engagement with council members over the next 3 months. Importantly, we will in the next session deal with a further deep dive into asset management plan impacts and also the implications of those significant renewals, which we've had some commentary on tonight. The next session, as part of the CFG workshop, will be absolutely focused on that.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgman. I've got one last question, which is actually Councillor Kouros, and then we really need to go, so we're there for
Just
Sorry, Councillor Noon.
Can I request, Chair,
Yes.
that if for the next session, can we allocate enough time to go
That's useful
through,
feedback, thank you.
please? Because I think the goalpost has completely changed, and we need to do further work.
Apologies, Councillor Noon. Apologies, Councillor Davis. We really do need to
I
close.
never asked any questions.
I recognise you did.
Have we actually got a formal policy on prudential limits? We do.
Thank you. Thank you, elected members. We'll call that meeting closed at 5:52 p.m. Thank you.